Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Mike kindly introduced me, I'm the CEO of Central Asia Metals PLC. We're an operator in Kazakhstan. You've heard so far during this session improvements to the subsoil user license law. You've also heard about how attractive a place to do business that Kazakhstan is, and hopefully I can put some substance behind those claims from what we've actually done during our time in Kazakhstan. We actually have 3 assets at the moment within the group, 2 in Kazakhstan and 1 in Macedonia. The 2 in Kazakhstan, which I'll focus on this morning, our main project is a copper SXEW project, which produces around about 14,000 tonnes of cathode copper. It's got a life extending out to 2034, and it's a very low-cost operation, well within the lowest quartile in the world's copper production within the world, should I say. And we also have an exploration project just to the north of the country called Shuak. It's about 250 kilometres north of Astana. We finished a drilling program there this year, and we'll be looking at results over the course of the winter. And then late last year, about 12 months ago, we acquired, on the basis of our operations in Kazakhstan and the cash we generated, an asset in Macedonia, which is in the Balkan region, just north of Greece and bordering onto Bulgaria. And I'll touch a little bit on that just to say what we do there as well. Just a timeline for the group. We've actually been in Kazakhstan. We incorporated in 2006, and we've been operating there and developing a project there, the Kounrad project, since 2007. So not quite as long as the Spassky group, I hate to say it, but we have been there almost 12 years within the country, actually developing the project. We spent 3 years from 2007. We won on a tender basis the subsoil user license on a 60-40 basis with the government to actually develop that project. We spent 3 years trialling, testing, development, pre-feasibility study until 2010 September, just over 8 years ago now. We listed on AIM, on the London Stock Exchange. We raised $60 million against that project at a price of 96 pence per share. And from that date onwards, really, we've ploughed the money we've generated from the project back into growing the Kounrad project. And then late last year, we actually used some of the money to actually acquire this asset in Macedonia for $402.5 million. What else we've done, which was quite unique at the time with the money, is we've paid back to our shareholders $144 million during that time from when we announced the dividend policy back in 2012. So you can see that you can run successful businesses in Kazakhstan, which is testament to the things that the chaps were saying earlier. Latest results in terms of production and financial results were announced in September and October. In October, we put out our 9-month production numbers for the 3 assets that we've got, or the 2 assets, should I say, for Sasa and for Kounrad. And basically what they show is that we're on track. Our guidance for this year is 13,000 to 14,000 tonnes of cathode copper. For zinc, it's 21,000 to 23,000 tonnes. And for lead, it's 28,000 to 30,000 tonnes of lead. And those results simply show that we're on track to achieve that. The half-year results for this year, we generated a revenue just north of $100 million. So $102.4 million revenue in the first half of the year. From Kounrad, that was $40.5 million from selling copper, and Sasa generated close to $62 million. And on that, which is the key point, I suppose, in many ways, EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization, effectively cash flows from the operations before tax and interest charges. We made a margin of 63% on both projects, slightly more than that actually, but it averages out with the group at 63%. Kounrad generated $29 million and Sasa $42 million. Historically, we've never had any debt. We'd raised all the money to develop Kounrad effectively from equity on the stock exchange. When we acquired Sasa, it was the right time to put some debt on the balance sheet. We put on nearly $200 million of debt. We're now down to a net debt position of $125 million. Which is a position we're comfortable with as a business. Just quick, this really just shows the consistency of performance of Kounrad from when we developed it back in 2011 when we first started building it. We first started production in 2012, and since that time we've been developing the project to a point where now we're at a stable output of around about 14,000 tonnes of cathode copper. And the key points on this slide really are the low costs of production. You can see there halfway down the table, C1 cash costs of production, starting over at 63 cents per pound and then decreasing in 2016 when there was a major devaluation, you may recall, in Kazakhstan. We went down to 43 cents per pound of copper. That's less than $1,000 per tonne, and copper sells at today's prices around about $6,200 per tonne. So you can see there's a healthy margin there between what we produce it at and what we actually physically sell it at. And you can see there through the EBITDA margins coming through, 63%, fairly consistently, and over the 8-year period or whatever, 72 months, should I say, 6.5-year period, 60% margin. And there's also dividend paybacks, which has been consistent since 2012. Just another point on the dividend in terms of, why are we in business? We're in business for our shareholders, to make money for shareholders, but also I'll come on to the other stakeholders in the business, the local communities, the people that work for us, the government of Kazakhstan, etc. But our shareholder policy at the moment is that we will return back to our shareholders a target range of between 30 and 50% of the free cash flow that we defined as the net cash generated from the operating activities, less the capital expenditure. Obviously, we've got to take capital because all mines use a lot of capital to develop them, to actually implement things that we need to do to improve output, and therefore that's our new dividend policy. Historically, when we started Kounrad, we did it on the basis of revenue, and we paid back 30% of that revenue to shareholders from when we first started production. And you can see our performance there with our peers in terms of where we stand in terms of return on capital employed and total shareholder return since we started business. So I think they're pretty healthy numbers, and we've been paying dividends back since 2012 off of business in Kazakhstan. The other stakeholders that are important to us in the business is obviously our employees. We look after the employees, their welfare. We now employ over 1,000 people in Kazakhstan and Macedonia. Health and safety on site is a #1 priority for the group, and just generally their welfare overall. And then you've got the other stakeholders, the local community, looking after the environment in which we operate, looking after basically giving donations effectively. In Kazakhstan, we run what we call a Coonrad Social Foundation, which is basically to just put money into the local villages, which are quite poor in many ways, and just help them where you can in terms of education, be it health, just basically putting money into the community, which is deemed as a very good thing to do, obviously, and it's absolutely fundamental in the mining game nowadays that you actually do this. Sorry about that. So what do we actually do at Kudrin? It's not actually traditional mining. What we do is when we won the tender, it was to process the waste dumps at a mine which have been operating in Kazakhstan for probably over 70 years. It's a huge open pit mine. You can probably just about see on the diagram there the area which is an open pit. That open pit is about 500 metres deep, 2 kilometres north to south and about a kilometre east to west. It's a huge hole in the ground that's produced about 3 million tonnes of copper from 1936 through to when it stopped effectively mining back in 2006. So what we did, we effectively won the tender to process, you can just see round to the southwest and the east, what they call the dumps. And we process the copper that's within those dumps. There's about 650 million tonnes of ore dumped on the surface. Approximately 180 million tonnes to the east, and the balance is in the southwest where we've just started leaching. We irrigate those dumps by putting small plastic pipes with little nicks in it, and we put highly dilute sulfuric acid onto them. It captures copper into a solution, and that what we call pregnant leach solution we take to a traditional SXEW plant, and that stands for solvent extraction electrowinning, just traditional electrolysis of cathode copper. So it's an anode and a cathode, positive and negative, run a direct current through it, and on a commercial scale you plate copper, needs no further refining, and then we send it off through an offtake partner called Traxys, whose responsibility it is to take it out into the marketplace. Sounds very simple here. There's a lot of science gone into it, a lot of design, a lot of effort gone into making that the case, but it is a low-cost operation. It is a low-cost operation, and it produces very pure copper. We have the eastern dumps and western dumps, as you can see on the slide there. We started in the eastern dumps. We've leached now over 67,000 tonnes of copper there, and we've probably got about 15,000 tonnes remaining. And on the west, we've only just started operating there in April of last year. We've now been leaching there for nearly a year and a half, or just over a year and a half, should I say. And we've probably produced about 12,500 tonnes of copper from that area. And now the idea is that we'll generally transition from the east to the west, such that in 2 or 3 years' time, all the copper will be coming from the western dumps. The plant is in the east, and the dashed lines you can see there is simply a large pipeline that transfers copper from the west to the east. Just a few more diagrams on it, just really what I've just explained to you effectively in terms of diagrammatical form. The thing that is interesting is the copper recovery curve in the middle there. We have these for most of the cells that we operate in, and what we're basically saying is, what is our plan to recover copper on the site? We don't get all the copper back. In the east, we plan on 50%, and in the west, it's something of the magnitude 35 to 42% that we plan. And what we do is we model what we think we'll recover, and then we actually measure against that. And you can see from that graph there, we generally come on in line with what we plan to actually recover from the dumps. And we've been doing this for 6.5 years, so we've got a good track record now to know what we're going to actually recover from the dumps. Just a quick update on where, how we've developed the project over the years. Small incremental improvements. It is seasonal. It gets very cold in Kazakhstan, as I'm sure a lot of you know here. We have -38 for over a week this winter, but we still produce copper. Very cold, still produce copper, keep the solutions flowing. We've got 2.8 megawatt boilers on site which heat the solution as we put it on the dumps. Stays warm or stays at the appropriate temperature, get it to the plant, and then you've got the copper still being produced. The plant runs on a 99% availability. So we're producing copper every single day of the week, just 50 tonnes a day or whatever, to get the 14,000 tonnes that we need annually. Key slide this. Why has the project been so successful? It's because it's very low cost. That chart you can see on the bottom right hand corner there from a company called Wood Mackenzie is what you call a copper cost curve. So it's got all the world's copper producers, of which the world produces in excess now of 20 million tonnes of copper and consumes that amount of copper per annum. We only do 14,000 tonnes, so we're a really small player in the market, but we're one of the world's lowest copper, in terms of cost, one of the lowest cost producers there. And we're down at 53 cents per pound. That's just a breakdown of the costs that make up that 53 cents per pound. Slightly over $1,000 per tonne, and as I said before, copper's selling at $6,200 per tonne at the moment. That's probably enough on Kounrad. I think that's, the focus of this session is on Kazakhstan. That's what's built the company, running a successful business in Kazakhstan. It is possible to do. You follow the laws. Sometimes it's frustrating, it's a bit bureaucratic, but if you do things the right way, you can get a successful business in. That is what enabled us to actually build the group into a bigger group now. We've got a market cap close to $500 million on the stock exchange. We purchased this asset, which is called the Sasa asset. It's an underground lead and zinc mine in the Balkan region. Employs over 700 people. It's consistently churned out 800,000 tonnes of ore every year, and the levels of lead and trait that I mentioned before. So 21 to 23,000 tonnes of zinc is our target this year, and 28 to 30,000 tonnes of lead, both in concentrate form that we ship over to Bulgaria for further refining. It's well developed in terms of capital, and it's also a low-cost mine. Kounrad's a very low-cost mine. Our ethos is very much, if you get a low-cost operation, whatever the metal prices do, you can stay in business, and that's the key to success in the game. Just a production output that we that we put out in October shows that we're on track. It's pretty consistent output, as I said before, and justifies what I've just talked about in terms of production numbers. Similar to what I showed before, there's a zinc C1 cash cost just as much as a copper one. You could actually do a lead one if you want, but I think zinc is deemed maybe a sexier metal. Most people talk about the zinc cost as opposed to lead cost. Zinc and lead generally go together in mines. And so transparently, which I think is something else that we're proud of, in our reports we show what are our costs in terms of producing zinc. Not quite in the lowest quartile, but certainly on the cusp, about 26 I think it is, disappointingly, but we'll work at that. 44 cents per pound, which again is around about $1,000 per tonne. Zinc is today selling at around about $2,500 per tonne, and that's come off highs of north of $3,000 per tonne. Clearly, it's a mine that we've only owned for 12 months. It's not a clean sheet of paper that, as we developed Kounrad from the bottom up and took our own staff on and developed the processes, and actually the design of the plant was our design. This is something we've acquired. So obviously we've looked at it. There are areas we feel we can optimise. Not double the production, but optimise. Maybe a 5%, 10% increase in throughput. We recruited a highly experienced chief operating officer when we acquired the mine. He's got his team in place now, and we're looking at optimising the operation over the next few years. And this is what traditionally goes with an underground mine, tailing storage facility. We've just finished off almost at the end of this year. We're just about to finish this tailing storage facility. That'll give us another 7 years of capacity before we have to think about, well, obviously we'll think earlier than that, but 7 years capacity for the storage of the tailings. I mentioned we had 3 assets. I've mentioned the 2 main ones are what I've just mentioned, Sasa and Kounrad. They're the ones that generate the cash flow for us. They're the ones that give us the ability to pay dividends, to build the business and to invest in the next growth opportunity. This is a potential upside we've got, again in Kazakhstan, which is an area we want to invest more in. We've finished the drilling program. We've got some interesting intersections. We haven't yet analysed all the data, but we will get around to that during the winter months and see where we go to with the Shuak project. I think the key to it is that it shows we do want to invest more in Kazakhstan. We've had a good experience there. Our aim is to invest more and actually develop other projects where possible in Kazakhstan. And just to summarise and finish off, just the outlook really. We've got diversification of metals, geographical jurisdiction, low-cost operations, on track for guidance this year, paying a healthy dividend back to our shareholders. And as I say, this is all on the back really of a successful business in Kazakhstan. So it is a good place to do business. You can do business there, and we've had a good experience there since, not quite Spassky era, but 2007.